are now live. So we will give it a minute or two for the participants to enter. I know Zoom likes to stagger this, so we'll just give it a couple of minutes before we kick off with some introductions and the agenda for today. I should have really prepared a few remarks or jokes to fill this awkward minute or two that we have, but I haven't. So instead, we'll give it a minute to silence. Don't know how many events or how many all hand presentations and stuff like that you guys have been up to in lockdown, but every Wednesday at HackerJob we do a company all hands. So I've now mastered the art of sitting in silence on Zoom with 46 other people joining, which is always fun. But I know Zoom can sometimes just take a minute or two to let everyone in. So we'll let the numbers jump up before we kick off officially. And if you are just joining, you haven't missed anything yet, do not worry. We're just waiting for a minute or so for Zoom to let everybody in, and then we will get started.
Go on, Mark, sing us a song.
Yeah, it's not my forte. We have a person in the team called James Ball at HackerJob, and he's my go-to on these sorts of awkward moments. He tells really bad cheese jokes, and he's always got a new one lined up. So that's my go-to for the content. But I'm not going to do it. They're not particularly funny. Cool. I think we'll get started, given that we've got a lot to get through and only until 1 p.m. today. So a big welcome to everybody that is tuned in. My name is Mark. I'm the moderator for today's session. Shortly, I will go through a bit of an agenda and a plan for this week's events. But in the meantime, I'm just going to get our panelists to give a quick introduction to who they are, so everybody's got all of the context. And Emily, I'll come to you first.
Thank you so much, Mark. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the call today. So my name's Emily Thorne, and I am the technology recruiter at Direct Line Group.
Fantastic. Thank you, Emily, and great to have you on board today. Lukasz, in the HackerJob t-shirt, we'll come to you next.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Lukasz Woznicki. I'm lead software engineer at Software AG. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lukasz. Lavanya?
Hi everyone, I'm Lavanya. I am a software engineer and have been for the past 5 years.
Fantastic, thank you. And last but no means least, Sean.
Good morning, everyone. Or afternoon now. Good afternoon. My name's Sean Heinen. I head up the talent acquisition team at Form 3. Also, happy International Women's Day.
Absolutely, happy International Women's Day indeed. We've got some really cool things actually that our team have been working on today to celebrate that. Maybe I'll give that a bit of a plug at the end of this session. But let's get into it. So I'm going to just quickly share my screen and run through just some housekeeping, just so that everybody's aligned with what we're trying to achieve today. And then we're going to get into the panel discussions. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. I'm going to roll on like they can. So what Tech Talent won in 2021? What is this event and what are we doing? So every day this week from 12 till 1, we're going to be hosting a lunch and learn based on some research that we've completed. And I'll share some insight on that research in a second. Today, we're focusing at sort of the top of the funnel when it comes to recruitment, on how to kind of perfect your outreach and comms when sourcing technical talents. This is our 4th installment of TRT. It started this time last year when the UK first went into lockdown, and we ran a 2-week training program for recruiters to learn tech. All of that content's online. We've since done 2 more seasons, and this is season 4. So really, really excited. I think this is some of the best content our team have produced, and we've got an awesome panel every day this week. In terms of how to get engaged with this session today, we want this session to be as engaging as possible. So if you do have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A section. It enables us to manage them as easily as you can. So please, at any point, add them in and we'll come to you on them. Just some super Zoom logistics. If you are planning to join every session this week, you'll be invited to a new webinar each day. So please just check your inbox for that. If you've got any issues, there's an email on the screen there. And tell your friends. We've got about 100 people joining live today, which is amazing. So if you get value from the session, feel free to share it online, LinkedIn, etc., and share with your friends. And what is this topic of the week? Well, our marketing team have been busy and have conducted some research. We've surveyed around 2,000 engineers across all disciplines, so software engineering, DevOps, data, etc., to understand what are they looking for in 2021. And we're going to be sharing the key findings of this report each day this week. And all of you that attend today and each day will receive a copy of that part of the report before it gets published next week. So you get a bit of an early sneak peek to the full piece of research. In terms of the agenda for the week, today we're focusing on perfecting your outreach and comms. Tomorrow we're going to be discussing mastering the interview process and technical testing. Wednesday we'll be covering the perks and benefits that matter the most in 2021. On Thursday we're going to be talking about D&I, but a really nice twist on that, kind of D&I from the engineer's perspective, which I think is going to be really, really exciting. And then, of course, we couldn't do a future of work and future of tech hiring event without talking about COVID-19. So on Friday, we'll be discussing that. I think one of the really unique things about the event this week is that on each of the panels, as you'll see today, there's a mix of software engineers and technical talent and internal recruiters. And we're really excited to see the blend of those two come to give some unique insight. And final thing for me, the most important thing, of course, you know, we all need a little bit of incentive to stay with these online courses. So the Hacker Job Wine Club is back. This was something we launched a year ago to help our clients get through lockdown in one piece. I know Sean has joined a few of them. I think Emily has too. So if you attend 4 of the 5 sessions today, you'll get invited to our next wine tasting event. And of course, all of the panelists will be there. Great opportunity to network. And more importantly, drink wine. Yeah, hopefully we'll see some of you there. But moving on to today's session. So some of the topics we're going to be covering on today's agenda is firstly sort of the sentiment around moving jobs post-COVID-19. And talking about kind of managing the interview process from a candidate's perspective, you know, being authentic versus kind of playing the game in the interview process. Using events and new types of media to engage with technical talent. And also just that overall approach and engagement piece. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen because it's a lot more engaging when we can see the panelist's face instead. And we're going to get into it. So the first key insight from the report that we're going to discuss, and Lucas and Lavanya, I'll come to you first on this one, is that 79.5% of the engineers we surveyed said they would not be working for the same company they are now in the next 2 years. So I think this is a big topic that is discussed a lot, you know, attrition rates and how, you know, companies handle this. I think, Lucas, let's come to you first on this. What is your perception of this insight? You know, have you in the past moved jobs frequently? If so, why? And it'd be great to kind of get your take on this.
Yes, I think I'm a perfect example of such a job hopper, as everyone calls people who change these jobs too often. I think I average on about 2.5, 3 years in a company. One of the major reasons, I think, on my side, it's lack of opportunities and the career progression. So, you know, whenever you try to get this next step in your career, you know, going from junior to mid-level or mid-level to senior, and if the company doesn't make it easy for you, it's kind of off-putting, I would say, that, you know, you want to find other company where you're gonna either just jump into this next level role or basically will be allowed for this progression. And in my case, there was another very big biting point, which was salary increase. So my last company was so keen that they didn't give me any pay increase for 3 years. So that is another, I think, very important point, that, you know, you expect certain, at least this 3 to 5% rise every year. But if you don't get it, then you just, you know, your market rates goes up, but your salary doesn't. So I think it was in my case very often as well.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And I think the career development point is going to be something that recurred to throughout this whole week, but also the fact that you can have the best stack in the world, the best projects in the world, engineers are still humans and money still matters. And I think that's a crucial point. Lavanya, what about you? What's your kind of opening take on this?
Sure. So I was a female graduate 5 years ago from Edinburgh, and I had to overcome the catch-22, that is to get a job first in order to get hired by known or well tech companies. So my first job was like a small Java developer role in Crowley, and it was a US-based, team, and there was much not into there's not a lot of tech that I had to pick up. But as for a software engineer, I always felt like I have to expand my knowledge, and I want to venture into different technologies, and that's why I change roles frequently, because being a female software engineer, you want to push your boundaries, not just simply, sit there and being told to what to do. You want to experiment. So I think for me, working in startups, in a culture where, or companies' culture where they push for new tech and push for innovation helped a lot. Yes, there are some companies have asked me why I have changed frequently, and they are, I'd like to say, traditional companies, and I do understand why they think I might be a risky investment because of the functional knowledge that you have to learn. So that's not an issue at all for me, and I do completely understand their perspective. As for me, what has driven my job search is, I would say, salary, culture, and the genuine satisfaction you get from product development. So it's just not about getting paid every month. You just need to feel satisfied. And that pushed my drive to change jobs frequently and to make myself happy.
Yeah, awesome. And again, some similar points there from Lukash on that, developing your own skills and wanting to push yourself further. Let's get the internal recruitment perspective on this. Emily, when you're recruiting for roles at Direct Line, what do you think when you see potential engineer that's changing jobs quite frequently? Would you pass on somebody that's done that? What's kind of your attitudes to people that are changing roles relatively frequently? And Emily, I'm going to use the 2021 buzzword. You're currently on mute.
I knew this would happen, and it was one of my biggest fears, so I'm glad that's over and done with. I think it's always good to obviously speak to the candidate first, get to the bottom of why are you in this position. It could be that they're a contractor, and like Lavanya said, a lot around the technologies that they wanted to change. You might be an engineer in a huge team doing the same thing every day, or you might be an engineer in, for example, a small startup where you've got perhaps too many jobs and you want to focus on something in particular. So it really does depend on situation. I wouldn't necessarily bypass somebody that has changed jobs a lot. I think if a candidate was to come into an interview and said what Lavanya had just said now, that would be perfect and that would be spot on. We want people to be able to develop in their career and use new technologies. And also a point on the culture side of things as well. People change. The company might not be the best fit for them when it was 5 years ago. But saying that, there's also lots of candidates that have worked for the same company for 20 years. Maybe they've been too nervous to see if the grass is going to be greener elsewhere. So there's definitely both ways to the story. But I think it's good that people want to move on and they want to expand their skill set. So yeah, I wouldn't bypass it on that reasons.
Fantastic. Yeah, makes complete sense. Sean, coming to you on this one before we'll go to a question from the audience. What's your take? How are you thinking about this at Form 3?
I don't think there's a hard or fast rule on this. I think my focus would be to don't judge people by their CV or by kind of the written information in front of you, if that's a kind of direct reach out or whatever it is. There could be so many reasons why someone has, quotation, job hopped. A lot of these reasons could be out of their control. For example, with COVID and other economic situations, there's been a lot of redundancies and stuff like that, and we shouldn't obviously look at that as a negative on the candidate application. It could be a contractor as well, and really enjoy go from business to business and learning more technologies and how businesses work. So we certainly shouldn't use this against them in an interview process. I think it's actually just more about going into detail via a kind of a face-to-face interview or video interview nowadays, finding out more about their drivers and what they really look for out of their opportunity, and make sure that aligns with what the business is offering, right? So if you're in an interview with a candidate and they're talking about what they're looking for out of their next role, and it's completely different to what your business offers, then it's quite an obvious decision from there. But if they're looking for exactly what you offer as a business and the technologies that you work with, then I don't think we should be looking negatively upon the reason why they've moved elsewhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that recurring theme from both you and Emily that I entirely agree with is I think we need to give engineers the benefit of the doubt. And, I think the CV is really the classic don't judge a book by its cover. I think it's really about understanding people's motives and drivers, as you touched on, to understand, if the role you've got, the company you've got is a good fit, which it may not be, or it might be. But I think giving people that benefit of the doubt is interesting. I want to come back to the contractor piece with IR35 and kind of see from the internal recruitment perspective how that's maybe changing. But we've got a question from one of the audience that I think it'd be great to hear Lukasz and Lavanya's point on. So Luke has asked, on the theme of International Women's Day, does seeing a diverse team influence your decision at all? So I assume this is in the interview process when you're interviewing with a company. Does seeing a diverse team kind of influence your decision maybe to progress with that company or maybe even to accept their offer? Lukasz, Lavanya, I don't mind who we start with on this one.
Lavanya, please go. In the theme of International Women's Day.
Of course. I suppose that I would be the diverse, bunch, right? So does it influence, it's an interesting point of view. I think, people do get hired for the talent. And I believe that each diverse background, people from diverse background brings talent to the table. And it does play a huge part, important, a role when making a decision about a company, because you want to work with people from different culture, background, and get to know, their experience and their perspective in life, even as a colleague, I suppose. So yes, it does matter to me, and let's hope that more companies, embrace the diversity and hire new talent.
It's a very difficult question to answer. I don't think that personally it influences me if the team is diverse or not, because I don't think it matters, if you're a woman, if you're a man, if you're 50 years old, if you're 20 years old. As Lavanya said, it's about your skill set and what we can share together as a team, as people who are going to work together, because that's eventually what we're going to do, work together. So yes, it does, but it doesn't to me, I would say.
It's really interesting. I was having a chat with somebody last week on this exact topic, and we were saying diversity of thought is so much more, or is the real value, right? That's where more creative ideas come from, etc. And how hard it is to measure diversity of thought in the interview process and look at it from that perspective. Sean, Emily, anything to add? Have either of you looked at your interview process and being more conscious about having diverse interview panels, or not something that's particularly on the agenda for either of you guys at the moment?
I think definitely for direct line group, having a diverse interview panel is really important to us. We want the candidate to be able to relate to our interview panel and encourage them to want to work here. It's really interesting to get the candidate's perspective of this as well, because ultimately it's for them. But I think it's really important to have a diverse interview panel just to show the culture and the company fit that we have here at DLG.
Awesome. Anything to add from your side, Sean?
No, completely agree with Emily. I think naturally it's a driver for a lot of technology firms, including ourselves, and many advantages around building a diverse team, and that's why everyone is so focused on it. I think it's all about, and this is a whole big other topic, and I don't want to go into too much detail about it, but something I'm very passionate about. So I'll probably talk for the rest of the call about it. But yeah, I think it's all about honesty and integrity during a process, so they know exactly what the culture is in the business, and that includes diversity stats across the team in which they're going to join. So I think it's about putting a diverse panel in front of them, but then also not just going the complete other way, and just because you've got someone from a certain background putting on loads of panelists from that background, just so it makes you look like you've got a diverse business. Like that's just not honest. So yeah.
And I think the honesty and integrity points may be the most important point here. We were chatting to a startup last week, and they were saying, we're a small team and currently we're all men, and we're very conscious that we want to change that. So it's right now impossible for them to have a genuine diverse panel, but we were saying, well, be honest about that in your interview process, right? And make that very clear. We are going to discuss D&I in loads of depth on Thursday, so if that is a particular topic of interest, tune in for that session. Just before we move on to the next question, I just want to touch on the contractor point, because Emily and Sean, you both mentioned this. Obviously, IR35 is coming into effect this time around after the 12-month delay, the 11th hour last year. It sounds like Emily and Sean, both of you are very open when you're reviewing CVs regardless. I think some of the pushback we'll sometimes see is, companies won't consider candidates from a contracting background. Maybe there isn't that legitimacy that they genuinely want a permanent position. Has IR35 changed either of yours thinking on this? Have you always kind of been quite open to contractor backgrounds anyway? And are there any, conversations happening internally around the IR35 piece? Emily, we'll come to you first.
So I think not that it's changed anything in particular, but I think it's definitely made us more open and enhanced the fact that somebody is contracting for 20 plus years, is now interested in a permanent position, and probably because of IR35. But either way, it has made the market more open to permanent roles as well, as it probably wasn't once before. People probably thought they'd be contracting forever. So internally, definitely opened our eyes to the fact that people can change what they want to do, and to accept them to want a permanent role. Yeah, I think it's definitely changed it.
What about yourself, Sean?
As Form 3 has grown out over the last kind of 2.5 years, we've hired close to 100 engineers now since I've been here. And a lot of those engineers have been from the world of contracting. Honestly, when looking at the CV, I wouldn't even batter an eyelid if they come from contracting background, and that is irrelevant of kind of the changes that are upon us. It's kind of been exactly the same in my head since I started close to 3 years ago. Yeah, as long as they've got the skills, the right backgrounds, and the right cultural fit, and then I'm happy.
Yeah, we need to get some of the recruiters we still work with that are more picky on this, because it'd be interesting just to get their thought process on why they might screen out people from a contracting background. We've had a few more questions. Super quick fire one to Lukasz and Lavanya, a follow up from Luke. Do you ever look through the team on LinkedIn to assess the diversity when you're interviewing with a company?
Not really. Actually, I think I deleted my LinkedIn profile. So I don't.
No worries. And Lukasz?
I do, yes. Especially people I interview with. These are kind of like my first place to go in LinkedIn and look up. It's not about who they are, but more about their expertise, their skill set, who they work for. So to kind of have a feeling where the interview may go in terms of technical questions, and then where to prepare better.
Fantastic. Great. In terms of, we've got a few more questions we're going to go to, and then we'll come back to the next insight. We've got a question here from Laura, who has asked, in relation to moving jobs every few years, has the pandemic impacted your view on this? I'm interested to know if some of the reasons for moving around are less prominent in the current climate. And I think, Lukasz and Lavanya, we'll start with you on this one, because one of the big pieces of, I'm sharing an insight from another day here. So apologies. But one of the big questions we keep getting asked by our clients is, are people more or less likely to look for a job because of the pandemic? So we asked the question, and it was split exactly in half. 50% of engineers said they're more likely to look for a job because of the pandemic, 50% said less. Lucas, we'll come to you first, and we'll come to Lavanya. Has COVID impacted your thinking around looking for a job over the last sort of 12 months or so? And if so, why?
I think general answer is short answer is yes, it did. I was anxious when I started looking for a job last year. This was I started just before the pandemic, about 2-3 months. I was obviously in a comfortable position of not rushing because I still had a job. It was more of looking for a change back then. But when the pandemic hit, I initially saw a downfall of offers, and the companies were very, very cautious, with their hiring practices. But towards the end of the year, the market started booming again, I would say, and more companies started hiring, and the interview process actually for me become more comfortable, because I didn't have to go to central London and all this tube stuff and so on and so on. And doing the video interviews, it's so much more comfortable. And also one of things which I prefer is the way the technical interviews are being performed. So there is no on-site code testing code. How you call it? Sorry, on-site code test interview, whatever you call it. They are now more either challenges or some hacker rank or whatever kind of test they are, which I prefer, and it makes me much more comfortable when I have my own keyboard, my own screen, all that stuff. So it did change it, and I think it's for the better now.
Awesome, super interesting. Lavanya, what's your take on this?
I think I would be again a bad example for this, because when the COVID hit, I decided to take a career break. So because I wanted to enjoy the summer and the lockdown, and I thought that would be a good opportunity. I only started recently to look for a job, and so far it's been neutral in the sense, yes, companies did approach, big, companies, banks, and they're very open to my CV, or they're looking past that. But there are not a lot of opportunities as pre-COVID, I would say. And as Lucas said, I do enjoy the online Zoom calls, tech interviews, and it's very less nerve-wracking, I would say, because you're not exactly in a present in the interview room. You don't have to worry about whether I'm sweating a lot or panicking and all of these things. So that kind of calms me down, and I quite like it.
Yeah, we're going to discuss this on Friday's session in more depth. But one of the things that's been really interesting is pre-COVID, there was almost a few companies that didn't like doing a recruitment process remotely, and they always had to come on site and made locations challenging. One of the great things over the last year, from a candidate experience perspective, from what we hear, is just how much easier it is now to interview when you don't need to leave your home. You don't need to be stressed about, can you find the office in time or whatever it may be. And we're going to spend a lot of Friday's session discussing that, so I'm not going to get into it in too much depth now. We've got a few more questions. I'm going to pause on some of these questions because we're going to touch them later in the week. So apologies if that's frustrating, but I don't want to take away all the content from some of the other sessions. So Ravesh has asked around the recruitment process. So I know Sean's typing an answer from what I can see. So I'll let Sean carry on doing that. Maybe you're not Sean and Zoom's lying to me. Apologies if that's the case, and I've just thrown you under the bus. But tomorrow's session is on entirely this. So what the recruitment process should look like, how engineers would rather be assessed, and things like that. So we're going to touch on that one in more detail tomorrow. Lucas and Lavanya, super quick fire. We can do a yes or no on this one. How important are Glassdoor reviews when researching a company you join? Lavanya, we'll come to you first.
A lot, actually. I go through the Glassdoor reviews, and I will always pick the negative ones, because that gives a lot more insight into the company, because that's truly someone who's affected by the company. There could be someone who would just say positive reviews because they wanted to look at another Glassdoor review because it's a must. if you've used Glassdoor. So the negative reviews kind of tell me how the management is currently handling the problem, and it might impact the questions I might ask them, what is the current situation, and how you can tackle it, because at the end of the day, it's an investment for both myself and the company, and it matters quite a bit.
Awesome. What about yourself, Lukash?
I used to, but I don't trust them anymore, because I've been made aware of a couple of companies which actually ask their employees to write positive reviews, even though their views were not exactly positive. So yeah, I go on to look at it, but I don't take it as granted. It's more of a not as an insight, more like just an overview.
Yeah, awesome. Makes complete sense. I think review sites are always a challenge. As a consumer, I'm always more likely to leave a negative review than a positive review. But to Lavanya's point, it can highlight some really interesting points to ask in the interview process as well, and to see how transparent people are willing to be. We've had a couple of questions around diversity and inclusion. I can see one from Joe around attracting underrepresented groups, and one from Phil around cultural fit. Again, I think we'll follow up with those in Wednesday's session, given that whole Thursday session, should I say, given that whole session is on D&I. And I want to make sure we've got time for other topics today, but we will make sure they're answered on Thursday's session. So if we move on to the second piece of insight that we got around this topic of outreach and engaging technical talent, we asked our audience, what are some engaging ways that companies can engage with you? Maybe we didn't ask it like that because you would have used the word engage twice in a question, and that's poor grammar, but luckily I'm not the one writing the questions. And we got some data back on what different engineers would like. And 46% of the engineers that we surveyed think that companies should use events as a way to engage with them. Sean, I know you at Form 3 thought a lot about this at the start of lockdown and decided to go in a slightly different direction. So it might be interesting to get some of the work you did on that and some of the really cool work you're doing with the podcast now.
Yeah, for sure. So we were actually looking to invest very heavily at the start of lockdown as we were growing a lot. We thought we'd invest a lot in meetups across Europe as we're a fully remote business. So we were looking to invest in meetups and sponsor as many as we can, build our own meetup, that sort of thing, in order to get our brand awareness out there and to also to add more value in this market and contribute to technology as a whole. We decided to deviate away from that, and that was because we were talking to a lot of our engineers and a lot of engineers on the market, and what became quite apparent is this is quite ironic because I'm on a video call as I say this, but it became quite apparent that people were spending an inordinate amount of their daytime on Zoom, and therefore in their own time didn't want to jump on more Zoom sessions or whatever. So we decided to go another route. So our head of platform, Kev, and the talent acquisition team and the marketing team came together and focused more on podcasts instead. So we launched our .tech podcast a couple of months ago, where we bring in panelists externally and internally to discuss topics around the technologies that we use and technologies that we want to go into. And we've had extremely positive feedback on the market about this. It's really good for the talent acquisition team because we can send all this information out to candidates that potentially are in process or candidates that we want to naturally pull into the process. It's a really good value add across the business. But we've had good feedback, and I think that's mostly around the fact that it's easy to listen to. It's easy to listen to a podcast whilst you're doing your day-to-day.
Yeah, super interesting. And actually, what we've learned is exactly that point. Any video and event content you do now do online, you can then transition it into audio content and have it up as follow-up content as well, which is really cool. You've got the live interaction, but then all of this is just great, evergreen content that you can always use. But I love the podcast. I haven't seen many organizations do it. And having listened to some of the episodes, I think it's so brilliant to to listen to how Form 3 are using technologies from a non-recruitment perspective, right? You can see it's just pure engineering and the challenges are solved. And I think it's a really cool approach. Emily, I know you have done some events because we've done one with DLG. How are Direct Line thinking about events as a way of engaging with technical talent?
Yeah, so we did one recently with Hacker Jobs, which was about our transition into Agile and what we're trying to do in terms of tech and Agile here at Direct Line Group. And it was a huge success. We've not done too much in terms of webinars and online events, actually. I think we've been focusing more on internal stories and how they found working from home and marketing that through LinkedIn so that people get a real insight of what it is like to work here at Direct Line Group from a culture perspective. I think it also works from what Sean was saying, that everybody is on video quite a lot during the day, so sometimes it's nice just to sit back and have a bit of a read instead. But I think it would be good to do some more in the future, hopefully with Hacker Jobs as well. That would be ideal. But it's definitely I think it's definitely a lot easier for the external market as opposed to turning up at an event somewhere and probably feeling a bit exposed or a bit nervous. It'll be a lot easier for people to get the information they need. And like on this call, you can just pop a question on the chat. You don't actually have to show your face and ask it directly. So yeah, we'll definitely be looking to do more in the future, but there is some great content on LinkedIn about working here.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because I think we had a similar thought process to kind of Sean at that, you know, at the start of lockdown, people won't want to really consume too much more video content. And then we started running this online event series. And it's actually surprised us how many engineers are signing up and attending these events because you think people have just got Zoom fatigue. But I think a lot of it is the fact that the events are recorded. You can watch them in your own time, which eventually effectively then becomes a podcast, right? Because you can just stick it on the background and listen to it. We've got a few tactical questions that we're going to come to in a second for Sean and Emily, but I think it'd be great to get the engineers' take on this. So, Lavanya, what's kind of your thought process on events? I mean, let's look at it in a pre-COVID lens and in a current environment. How have you found using events as a way to engage with organisations in the past?
Personally, I really don't attend events. I mean, I have attended few. And it wasn't for me because it takes a lot to take in, because there's a lot of, you know, you have people you have to meet, and you know, you have to pay attention to the talks and so on. So it really didn't help me understand the company culture and what a life would be like as an employee, because I think that's the main idea that you would get. I mean, I wanted to have by attending a event. So one of the companies that I used to work for, they did something really strange, but I quite liked it, is that they invited me for an entire day to do a technical challenge. So I had to not pair program, but people would sit with me. I had to discuss with them the solution that I'm working on, and it's more about the company culture. So it's a technical test, but I had people to discuss with and how to improve on and so on, which I quite enjoyed it. That I knew what kind of people that I would be working with, and everything I could see as a normal software engineer, what my role would be like. So I quite enjoyed it. As for events, I just feel like it's really not that cup of tea. I'm an introvert, so I like things to happen in small group of people rather than a lot of people at once, trying to make a good impression and not to say silly things that you had to think about, and all of that stresses me out. But it's me, so
no, awesome insight. It's really interesting insight, and I've always liked the idea of companies running whole day interview processes, but you compensate the candidate for their time. I think that's such an interesting model, but one that probably opens up a whole can of worms, and probably not one we'll discuss today. Lukasz, what about you and events? What's kind of your take on this?
Yes, so yes, I used to attend events. I think I used to do it quite a lot, especially like small meetups where, this was not too big event, but you had 10, 15, 20 people with the same interest, with basically someone you could talk to, I know, privately, but about professional stuff, hobby, whatever it was. I don't do it anymore, unfortunately. Well, unfortunately, I've got a family now, so I need to have much more time for kids and my wife and stuff. However, the very, very positive change for me is that when there is an event, obviously now I can have the comfort of watching a recording. So it can be an evening, I know, Friday evening or Saturday evening. If I want to spend watching an event when something happened, I can just do it whenever I want. I don't need to, take a time off or just go there and spend the whole day. Where I'm only interested, for example, in a 1 or 2 talks and then just some networking. Obviously, this made the networking much more difficult for me personally, because I moved quite a bit. I changed country of residence and stuff like that. It was very important to have this networking part as part of my social life. To get some mates, friends, where I can, talk, discuss, just message someone with a question maybe. So this was really important. Yeah, I think that's my take. I love new way of having online events, rewatch them whenever I need.
Yeah, no, awesome. And definitely check out Form 3's podcast if you haven't done so already. A few bits of tactical advice. Go on, Lukasz, sorry.
No, I was going to say just certainly will. I was actually quite I'm quite keen to podcasts, so certainly will check the Form 3 one.
Amazing. There you go, Sean. You've got your next guest lined up for you. You can thank me later. So just a couple of tactical questions for our internal recruiters on the call. Sean, we've got a question for you that I can see you've already gone back to James on, but I think you've only replied to the panelists, so he might not have been able to see that. So just so everyone else can see, James asked, what CRM do you use for your talent acquisition funnel to push content and collateral to prospective candidates? Sean, how are you doing that currently? And you're currently on mute.
You think I'd be used to that? I've been working remote for nearly 3 years now. Pushing to people in process. We which kind of from a candidate point of view use our application tracking system, which is Greenhouse. We use it on a lot of kind of automated emails out. For example, if a candidate gets through to the next stage, then they'll receive an email regarding the next stage, and then also a link to this content as an example. But most of it is via social media, and a lot of the activity that we've got on the podcast in particular is through LinkedIn or other Slack channels as well. We're on a lot of Slack workspaces for particular kind of technology. So, for example, we're Go Shop, so Golang engineers. So we use Gophers as an example.
Yeah, awesome. I love those online communities, whether it be on Slack, subreddits, etc. We find it's a brilliant way to push all of our engineering focused content out. Emily, I'm going to come to you with a question, not necessarily directly related to today's topic, so apologies. It's a little bit of a curveball, but I think it might be interesting to get your take nonetheless. We've had a couple of questions about people breaking into the tech sector, so more entry-level roles. We've had one around somebody wants to break into data science after being in talent acquisition for 4 years, and quite often their CV is not getting shortlisted for entry-level roles. What should they be doing differently? Is experience in software engineering essential? Can certifications help? So kind of just breaking in, in that entry-level space. I appreciate you focus mainly on experienced hires, so I am throwing you a bit of a curveball here. And we've had another one in from Ali around how they are struggling because of their English, and English isn't being their first language. How would you kind of advise people, if someone messaged you about the LG in that context?
So I think for the entry level roles, it's a really difficult one, because a lot of the time people's skills and experience will be based on the maturity of our current teams, and whether we have the seniority and the support to enable them to grow and develop in their career. Like you said, a lot of the time we are looking at specialist roles. So we need people that can come in and hit the ground running. A bit of advice, if I was looking for a junior or an entry-level candidate to come in, I would love to see projects and stuff that they've done on their CV. So links to their portfolios, different screenshots of what they're created, and a little bit more about what you can do. I think if it's a graduate position and you've gone to university, a lot of the technical skills that you learn at uni are quite standard throughout every different place. But if you have sort of proof of what you can do, it's a lot more eye-catching and engaging for when we are looking at your CV. I also do like a good old-fashioned phone call anyway, so just make sure you've got your details on there and you're open to having a chat. But I always ask people to send over their portfolio or a bit of evidence of what they can do so that we can submit that and see if it's the right style for us as well. In terms of English, I wouldn't really know how to go about answering that question, really. I suppose there are lots of different courses that you can do, and obviously put that on your CV about what percentage you scored in your written, spoken and communication in English as well. So that always happens. But ultimately, I think if your role isn't going to be engaging with stakeholders as much, and you're going to be developing and essentially talking to the computer all day, I don't think English is going to be much of a barrier in that sense. As long as you're a good technical candidate, then you can speak technical rather than English.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point on communication and English not being people's first language. I still don't think in the UK we're great at producing technical talents, and actually it quite often happens that the person's English isn't their first language. On a topic of inclusion, on this specific point, something to bear in mind of this is technical testing. If you're doing online tests, especially in a timed environment, bear in mind that the person reading the question may not have English as their first skill. We did a big project with a client on this, and they were basically doing quick fire online questions. And it's not just if you've not got English as your first language. If you've got dyslexia, then it may be impacting as well. So really something to think about in a diversity and inclusion perspective is making sure that your assessment process especially is inclusive. We're going to move on to the final piece of insight. Time just ran away from us. We've only got 13 minutes left. I feel like we could do this all day. And the final piece of insight is more on the topic of retention, which I think is always interesting. So a bit of a dichotomy here. We had 79.5% of engineers say they're probably going to leave their role in the next 2 years, but also 55% of engineers describe themselves as happy or very happy in their current role. Lavanya, we'll come to you first on this one. Talk us through that. What makes you happy in a role?
Sure. So I was fairly satisfied with my previous roles, most of them. What made me happy? We got like our own user roles in AWS, so we can spin up an instance and play around with it. So that's pretty much, you don't have to pay for your own, experimenting on AWS. So I thought it was quite fun. Having one-to-one meetings with managers, like a friend rather than a manager, employee kind of conversation. That was like, it's a friendly chat, those things. Show and tell was another one of them. So you can actually develop something that you work in your own time, or the 10% time, which I had the opportunity by the company. So you can present that and get people to actually come to the events. There's a company internal events, and that's kind of motivating, because you want to show what you have learned, or the thing that you discovered recently, and how you can use it as a proof of concept. Free drinks, coffee, and sometimes snacks, that's also a plus. Yeah, I mean, these are like a lot of perks. So I guess these are the things that made me happy in my previous roles.
Oh, awesome. And we're going to go into this in a lot of depth on Wednesday as well, but interesting you touched on spinning up AWS instances and that learning and development. I think that came out as the second most important factor behind salary. Again, I'm taking all of the team's headlines for the rest of the week, so they're going to hate me, but that's okay. Lukasz, coming to you, you know, when you've been in your previous roles or in your current role, what are the things that make you most happy and satisfied at work?
There's actually a very long list of those. I mean, I feel like I'm very happy. I'm on top of the satisfaction survey. If you ask me, I'm probably like, you know, top 1% of happiness at work. You know, I've got great company. I do things which matter to me, which are actually quite challenging technically, which is very important. So, you know, in terms of like what you like to do. But besides it, obviously all the benefits, the salary is, I think, top most important thing. But otherwise, things like currently I have a budget for personal development, like not only programming skills and whatever technology I work on, or if I want to learn new technology, but also for some more social / managerial skills if I want to learn. So this is really nice and something which I suppose every company should do, not only care about this technical side, but also on the employees' well-being. Budgets for learning, for example, either attending conferences, and a very nice perk, which is additional time off to attend events, so I don't have to take over, you know, take it out from my normal personal allowance, holiday allowance. This works great, and obviously, you know, due to pandemic, the whole benefit of working from home, but also the company wants to transform and be at least, you know, to a kind of a hybrid approach. So most work from home and then attend the office only a couple of days a week, or even less, or every couple of weeks. Which feels very comfortable to me, and I think this makes this benefit very, very nice and make me happy. You know, having this flexibility. There is no, you know, I don't have to sit in the office between 9 and 5. I can work, you know, anytime I want to. Obviously, there are meetings which I have to attend, like, I know, daily standards or stuff like that. But otherwise, it's pretty much, you know, 90% flexible hours. That's really also very important.
Yeah, and that's going to be the big topic that we discuss on Friday. I'm not going to take anyone's headlines from Friday because it's you know, obviously the elephant in the room is, you know, what do people want post-COVID, and I think the hybrid setup you touched on there, Lukasz, I think is what engineers are going to want. It's going to be really interesting to see what companies end up delivering.
Well, I personally would prefer full working from home, but obviously not everyone feels comfortable. Not everyone has space. But as you said, you've got other panel to discuss these topics.
yeah, we're not going to go there now because otherwise we really will overrun way into 2 o'clock. Sean, coming to you on this topic, you mentioned you've hired over 100 engineers at Form 3 over the last couple of years. Obviously, bringing them in is hard enough, keeping them is even harder. What are you doing to ensure you've got that great, you know, retention and a culture where people want to stay?
It's a really interesting topic, and I think something to make very clear is that you can, and the stats obviously show this very well, that you can be extremely happy where you are, but still leave a role. And I think that's even more apparent in the world of technology. What I've seen over the last few years, as an example, is a lot of people love the place that they work, the culture, everything like that, but the technologies haven't shifted in a direction that they want to go. For example, from a language point of view, they may be working on a Java stack at the moment, and that business isn't deviating away from that language. Whereas in their own time, they're doing loads of stuff in Erlang or whatever it might be, and they may have to move roles in order to develop their skills commercially in that language and that technology. This is one example. And we've seen a lot of that over the last kind of 3 years that I've been here in particular, where people looking to join Form 3 because we work with Golang as a main choice of language. How to keep engineers? I mean, very lucky. We've had a very good kind of attrition rate here at Form 3, and many reasons. I think the opportunity to be involved in modern technologies is probably the biggest one, but also forever changing technologies. So we don't look at our stack and think, right, that's going to stay for the next 5-10 years. We're continually evaluating that and letting our engineers be heavily involved in what we use and how we use it. I think Lucas mentioned progression and personal development, which is naturally very important. We don't externally hire any tech leads or tech managers at all. So what we do is we hire all of those internally. So once you've done past your probation, you can be in a position to apply for tech lead roles, which when you're hiring at the rate that we are, naturally are coming up all the time. But I think there's, in the world of technology, there's always a focus on, all right, the next route is management, which it shouldn't be. For us, we're also focused on other routes of development, maybe a bit more of an individual contributor focus, right? For those that have different focuses from a development point of view. So maybe development into architecture, platform, DevOps, whatever it might be. So that's a big point for us, and something that our people team have focused really, really heavily on. The other side is, I think for us, so before COVID, we'd been remote first from the beginning of the business, and we're nearly 5 years old now. So it's not just, do you offer remote working, it's how you offer it. So are you a good remote working business? Have you been doing it for a long time? Do you know how to do it effectively so people don't miss out or don't get FOMO, as they say? So that's super important. Challenge day to day. I think within the world of technology, people want to be challenged. They want it to be developed. They want to work within an environment where they are tested and in a good way. So giving people complex solutions to solve is super important. And then it's just generally down to culture. And I think, like Mark said, if we open up that discussion, we'll probably be here for another few hours.
Which is great to know that we've got that much content. We could comfortably be here for the next few hours. And there's so many points I want to go in on that. And there's so many strands we could go, but we are limited by time. But I think one thing before we're going to let Emily finish up on this session today is this idea of your alumni network. If you've got this dichotomy that 80% of engineers are going to change job in the next 2 years, and like Sean said, they might do that whilst they're very happy in it working for you. How do you then leverage them once they've left the business? And I think that's another very interesting discussion when it comes to engaging talent. Emily, talk us through DLG. How are you? You're on this huge digital transformation project. How are you thinking about building an environment and retaining the talent that you bring in?
So I think ultimately we want to hear if somebody is unhappy or has concerns in their current role before they hand in that paper. There's lots of things that we want to do to make sure that their concerns are resolved. So we have fortnightly one-to-ones, we have monthly reviews, we have calls with Penny James, our CEO, and you can actually go on and ask a question quite openly to Penny and her ExCo team. So there's lots of stuff that we can do to help you resolve these issues. I think, like Sean said, if it's a tech thing, it's probably a little bit harder for us to start engaging you in the tech that you want to work with, because we are such a big company. But we are, of course, always changing. We've just moved our claim centre database, which was made back in the 80s, to try and get that up into the 21st century. So lots of exciting stuff going on. We have mental health first aiders in pretty much every floor, every team, I think. So it's just about making sure that everybody is happy, and if there is concern, then we can resolve that. We also fill, I think, about 40% of our roles internally. So instead of moving company, just move roles within DLG, and obviously see how that goes as well. We also have in touch days. So if you want to go for a new role, but you're not too sure what it's about, you can just message somebody in that team and say, hey, can I sit with you for the rest of the day and see what you do? Obviously it was probably a lot easier when we was in the office. You could just go down and tap on their desk, but yeah, it still happens. So yeah, I think, obviously culture is a massive part of DLG, and we're such a huge company. We need to make sure that everybody is happy.
Yeah, and I love these panels where we get an organisation like Form 3 right at the scale up phase, and DLG, probably one of the largest employers in the UK. It's brilliant to hear the similarities and the differences. I just want to address a few of the questions we've had, and then we're going to wrap up. So James is asking a question around CRMs, reference candidate ID, which is a really cool product. James, I will check with Sean and Emily and see if they're happy to connect with you afterwards on that, because I'm conscious we're out of time. And also, Martin, your question on location, tune into Friday's session for that one. And Robert, I'll make sure that we follow up with you on your question as well. But I'm conscious we now are at time, so I just want to say a massive thank you to Emily, Lukasz, Lavanya and Sean, and a massive thank you to everybody that joined in to that session. I thoroughly enjoyed moderating it. We're back tomorrow at 12 o'clock, so hopefully we'll see you all there. But thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.